So, have you been thinking about selling your home, but you're unsure because of the very high interest rates and the really high increasing prices in real estate? You might not be sure because right now your home property might be at all-time highs, but also you might be chilling with such a low interest rate. So in this video, I'm going to tell you about whether it's a good idea to sell your home or not. I'm going to give you a few scenarios, and hopefully at the end of this video, you'll be able to get an idea and be able to make a better decision. My name is Shah. I'm a real estate agent from the Metro Detroit area at Real Brokerage. If you ever need any help with selling or buying, please let me know. So let's talk about the real estate market and give you a little bit of recap of what has happened and where we are right now. So during the pandemic, we had some really low interest rates. We're talking about 2 to 3% rates. People were able to refinance them and get really low mortgage rates, which means that it costs way less to borrow money for a property and your monthly payments are way less than what it would be now. People are getting right now a 7% rate, 8%, 9% if they're investment properties. So, money's been tightened and it's a lot more expensive to do real estate business than it used to be just a couple years ago. But this is the situation now. Many homeowners were able to refinance or buy a home at that time, or now they're sitting in a home with such a low interest rate. Their home price might have went up, but right now they're paying way less than what someone would buy a similar home at this time. This is also one of the big reasons why we don't see as many homes on market and there's such a huge inventory shortage in general. It's because many of these homeowners right now, they're showing with such a low interest rate, they don't want to move and increase their monthly payments, so they're just waiting to sell until the interest rates get lower. Let's talk about a few scenarios where it does make sense to sell so you can have a better idea. So the first one would be inheritance. I'm sorry for your loss, but if someone has passed away and you are inheriting a property, and if it's like fully paid off, or even if it has a mortgage, right, you have to take on that responsibility. So sometimes just selling off that property might be the better idea. If you inherit a property from a dead relative or parent, you will have to take over their mortgage if they still had one, property taxes, utilities, and you have to worry about the property. You have to worry about squatters and all these type of stuff. So sometimes it might just be better for you to sell that property. If there's a clear-cut way, or if you have to split it with people, I would suggest you get into a trust and you have an expert deal with that. You can talk to your realtor. Also, sometimes a lawyer might be needed depending on the situations. The second scenario is going to be divorce. So far, they're not really good scenarios to be in. I'm sorry, but divorce is a legitimate scenario to sell your home no matter what time, because if you're trying to split your assets, a lot of your money is locked up in that home, and the home needs to be sold in order to split that money. Especially also, if you're going to be on your own now for the short term, until you find someone else, I guess, is that if you decide to keep that house, the house might be way too much for you to afford because now your ex is not there helping you pay that mortgage. So depending on the situation, you might have to sell your property so you can liquidate that money and be able to split your assets equally. Third scenario, it's going to be a bit better now, is relocating for a job. If you have to move out of state right now, like if you have to move to Chicago, you're not going to be able to live in Detroit and then just commute there, right? So you have to move and sell your home. Or you can always possibly rent it out, which we will talk about later in this video. If you're moving, you have no choice. You have to sell. Now, the option of you buying there or renting there, that's a whole different topic for another video, which I've made on. But for the meantime, you might have to let go of your property if you're going to move. Makes sense. Scenario 4 is financial hardship. This is also not a good scenario to be in, but if you're struggling to pay your home payments each month, or if you have lost your job or took a pay cut, or something's happened in the family where you can't afford this home anymore, or it's becoming really bad for you or hard for you, you might have to sell your home. You have to first look out for your personal budgeting and savings too. If you're not able to save, you don't want to be stuck in a golden jail. So if you can't afford your payments, I would suggest you sell that property, because you also don't want a record of evictions and all that stuff on your name when you're going through that process. It's just better to get rid of it. You might be able to get some money out of it too and be able to move into a smaller home with a cheaper payment. You might be able to fully pay it off with cash. Just depending on your situation and depending on your home and how much you owe. And, if you can afford the monthly payments, you should probably sell the home. Now, the fifth scenario is more of an investor's point, and it kind of similar to the inheritance. Let's say you have a property that's fully owned and you have no mortgage on it, or you have a lot of equity in that property. If you have a certain investment property and you find a deal where you can buy 2 more properties by selling your property, that might be an option for you. Now, there's going to be an option for getting a home equity line of credit later on, which I will talk about in this video, But if you're trying to get into more investment deals and you're really not using that property, or you feel like that if you can get rid of that property or get the money out of that property to buy new deals, that might be worth it. Now let's talk about a few situations where it does not make sense to sell and you probably should stay in your home. The first one be, if you have such a low interest rate and there's no real urgent need to move out of your property, then I suggest you just stay there. If you're comfortable in that property and you're relaxing there and there's no issues, then I would suggest you hold on to that property, because you'll probably get such a higher monthly payment if you decide to move out of that property. I would stay put if you're having a good time and you have a low monthly payment. Scenario number 2 is timing the market. Now, this is a type of method that you should never do in any type of investing, stocks, real estate, crypto, any of that. Timing the market, most people never get that done. If they could time the market, you would be a millionaire. Don't try to time the market. You're seeing this now because real estate prices are at all-time highs in many markets. So you're probably thinking, oh, this is the best time to sell. If this crash that everyone talks about comes, I'm going to be losing. I should sell it right away. I would not sell it if just to time the market and get a better price, because what happens? You're going to be buying a new property. You have you reassess property taxes and a higher monthly payment. That might not be the move just to time the market. You have to realize where you can make money. If you can make a clear amount of money from selling your property and move into a property you like and have way less of a monthly payment, I guess go ahead for that. But right now in this market, it's very hard, especially if you're going to be using a traditional mortgage on that. Now, scenario number 3 is emotional attachment. Now, we all have to move on sometimes from certain things in life, especially your childhood homes and stuff. But sometimes, look, if you can afford to keep this property, you really want to keep this property, and you have such an emotional attachment to it, right? And it makes you feel really bad when you sell this property, don't sell it. You should only sell a property to make your situation better. And if you truly believe that getting rid of that property will ruin your situation, or it won't make a difference in your situation, keep the property. Properties can have a lot of significant meaning to you. There's a lot of things such as families. You might have grown up in there. Your parents used to live there. A lot of things can happen in a house which people develop strong attachments to. So it's very understandable. And if you really want to keep the house and you can afford to keep it, or it's not a big deal, I would suggest you keep the home so you don't feel bad. It's not worth selling your home and feeling really bad if you don't have to feel that bad and you're not in that financial situation that you need to sell. The fourth one is, if you have aspirations to be an investor or have some passive income, depending on your property and how much you owe on it, or your mortgage payments each month and the rental rates in your area, you might be able to rent out your property and make a profit. If you have to move out of that property, you can always pull out a home equity line of credit, which is a loan off the property you own, and you can buy another property with that. So that's another way you don't have to sell your property. So these are a few scenarios that does not make sense to sell, and there's a couple options out there for that. So now let's talk about a few considerations that you have to think about before you really make this decision. I just gave you scenarios, but your scenarios might not exactly fit into these type of situations. The first one would be financial considerations. You want to see how much equity you have left on the property. Equity is basically what you own in that property. The quick way to do that is by finding out the current market value of your home and finding out how much you owe left on the property, and you subtract those two values, and that's how you get your equity. If you have a lot of equity, it might be a lot easier to sell in this market because you'll be getting cash when you sell your property. If you don't have much equity, you have to realize that you have to sell it for way higher to create some equity, or you might be losing money when you sell your property, because the second one, which we're going to go into, is selling cost and buying cost of a property. When you're selling your home, it's going to cost money to sell it. You might have title fees, you will have agent commission to pay if you're going to be selling it with the agent. And then when you're on the buy side, you might have to pay commission from your pocket depending on the type of deal it is. Most real estate agents and me, for this new NAR settlement, we're just going to be pricing in the commission into the deal and the property. So you won't really have to notice it as much other than in the pricing of your next purchase. But it's a thing you have to consider. You might have to pay extra cost when you're moving. So you have to see all these costs, and a better way to get an idea of these costs is by talking to a real estate agent and title representative to see how much all of these things will add up and how much money you'll be out at the end of the day. So main gist is you basically want to find out how much does it cost to move, buying and selling wise, and see those costs and consider it in. Now, the third consideration, which we kind of went over earlier, is renting versus buying. You can always sell your property, or you can always rent it out and use the home equity line of credit to buy a new property. and you can always make some passive income, or you can always at the end of the day keep 2 properties. Eventually that equity builds up again in both properties, and you end up having more money when you're an older person. So always consider renting out. Now, if you're going to be renting out a property, just remember there's a lot of responsibilities to it. You can always hire a property manager, but you usually have to keep an eye on that property manager also. So with renting comes a lot of responsibilities of owning that property and managing the tenants. So it might not be for everyone, it might be for you. Depending on what kind of person you are and what you want to do with your life, it's always possible to rent out. Now, here are a few unique solutions not really related to selling, but you could probably implement into your property that might make your situation better. The first one is short-term rentals, Airbnb. If you're living at the property, you can always rent out a room or rent out a portion of your house, or if you're happening to be out of town or you travel a lot, you can always Airbnb out your property and make some passive income by having someone stay there. Now, Airbnb is a very difficult business, especially if you want to do it as a competitive profit-wise, but I see people who live at a home and they will Airbnb their own spot out just to cover some cost or to reduce their expenses each month. So that's always a consideration, especially if you're not always in your home, or if you have a lot of extra space in your house, you can always turn that into a short-term rental. Second one is co-living arrangements, or in other short terms, roommates. If you can get a roommate and you're able to do that in your situation, that might be a good idea. You can always reduce your monthly expenses by having someone else pay you rent. It's a good idea to lower your costs, especially if you're maybe struggling to pay your current mortgage payments. Renting out might be a very good option compared to selling your property. You might be even able to save your deal and maybe even make some money off it. Now, the third one is home equity line. Basically, HELOC loan or cash out refi, or basically taking loans out of your current property, and how much money you own, the equity you have in that property, you can take that out in a loan and use that cash. So that's a way, but you will have to be paying interest on those loans, and they're usually way higher than even the traditional mortgages of buying. So you have to keep that in mind, and if you're not willing to pay the interest payments, then selling might be your option. But depending on what you're doing with that money that you're pulling out a loan on, it might be worth it. You have to consider the monthly cost and holding that loan, because it does cost money to hold that loan and take out a home equity line of credit or cash out refi, anything like that. So this is the end of the video. We basically talked about a few scenarios where it makes sense to sell. If you're going through a divorce, financial hardship, if you have to move for a certain reason, any family, personal reasons, like that's urgent, you gotta move, sell your property. Now, many situations that doesn't make sense, it's basically if you have such a low payment and there's no real need to move, then don't move. If you're trying to time the market and be some genius, don't do that. If you feel really bad about selling your property, that might not be a good idea. And if you're considering to rent out your property, consider that option. And then for considering your property, you want to look at how much money and the finances of your current property, how much money you have on that property, you want to consider that, and see how much it costs to move, and factor all those prices in. And if it's profitable at the end of the day, it's a good idea to move and sell your property. If it's not going to be that profitable and your situation is not going to greatly improve by moving and you don't have to, then you shouldn't move. Basically, the people who need to move will move and sell your property. If you really don't need to move and you're comfortable, don't sell your property. Hopefully you have a better idea whether it's a good idea to sell your property or not. If you still have questions, you can always DM me or comment down below. I will always help you. Thank you guys for watching, and you guys have a great day.